Okay, we're coming up on screen now. Hey, good morning, everyone. I have the beautiful Suellen Saidee Cook. Absolutely
Morning, everyone.
gorgeous.
Morning.
Oh, as per normal, I've left my phone volume on and we are coming through, so that's good news. So we're really stretching the internet today because we've got, not only am I streaming Zoom into here, but then I'm also streaming out to YouTube. So this is a bit of a test. Fingers crossed it works beautifully. We can only hope. Thank you all for joining us. We've already got a record number of people that are here from the get-go. I don't know, I think we had about 150 on the kickoff, so we're looking like we're going to break a record. Welcome, Suellen. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, great. Yeah. Looking forward to this. So
Yeah, I'm
exciting.
super excited. I'm a huge fan of your work. I think I discovered your work. Well, I'm looking at your awards here, and I think it might have been back around 2015 when you took out the Tasmanian Professional Photographer of the Year, as well as the Illustrative Photographer of the Year that I first discovered your work.
Yeah,
And
right.
then you
Yeah.
went on to win the 2019 Professional Illustrative Photographer of the Year for Tassie. And of course, one of the big ones, the one we're all searching for quite often, is one of the categories at APA, where you won the 2018 𝗂𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗆 Australian Illustrative Professional Photographer of the Year. So congratulations on all of those. We're all looking forward to seeing your work. It's going to be amazing. Hey?
Well, I hope it lives up to the hype.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, before we get started, just a couple of things for everyone at home. Have a look in the description below. There's some more information about Suellen's website where you can jump over there and check out her body of work. It's absolutely incredible. You can also sign up to her email list so that you can make sure that you get updates about new images or, what Suellen's up to, more awards, this and that. Also there, I've put a link to the gallery that represents Suellen's artwork for sale. One of the images we're going to be looking at today is nearly sold out, but there's still a couple left. If you fall in love with it today, you can jump over there and have a look and contact the gallery. That being said, I think we're ready almost to hand it over to you, Suellen. Are you ready? You ready to go?
Yep. Well, just bear with me while I get this into screen mode.
Okay, I'll leave you to it. Let's sit back and enjoy, everyone. Put your questions in the comments down below, and I'll write them down as we go through, and we'll do a little interview at the end. Thanks, Suellen. I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining so far. This is amazing. It's blowing me away, really. This presentation I've only run a couple of times, so bear with me, and I've never done it live, so who knows what will happen. I'll do my best. As Adam mentioned, I have won a few awards, but we'll just slip over that. We don't need to talk about that now. But what I wanted to talk about was a little bit about my background and how I came to do what I do. I've been doing composite work for about 9 years now. I've had representation at Galerie Salamanca for 7 years. And so I just sort of tick away at doing these things. It's just my passion. And I feel that, like, as I've said there, a world without imagination is a world without inspiration. So tapping into my imagination is probably at the core of what I do. It's hard work. I'm not saying it's easy, and I don't get inspiration all the time, that's for sure. So it is quite hard to keep up momentum. And just currently with the COVID-19 thing, just watching some of Adam's presentations, it's been fabulously inspiring, to be honest. And I've sort of got my mojo back, which is really nice. And I'll talk about what I'm working on soon. So yeah, I sort of look on myself as being a photographer of the imagination, more than a classic photographer. This was my first composite image I made, and although it still is reasonably popular, it's a long time ago now, and I feel it's probably a little bit, compared to this, is one of my later ones. Yeah, no, you're right. Ah, okay. It's not sharing. Just to check, I might escape from that. That better? Right. Okay. Well, maybe I'll start again so that you can. I'll just say a few other things. These two images here are the ones I'm working on at the moment. This is a little bit of a series where, because I can't get out to photograph things, I'm just using what I've got, and that's a good stretch for my brain, I think. So this is something that we might look at later, a deconstruction of one of these. So Adam mentioned my awards, so we won't talk about that. I will talk a bit about how I got into photography, and that was probably when I was about 12 or 13. I think my dad was sort of keen on taking landscape photos, and so I got an Instamatic camera or something for Christmas, I can't remember, and started taking photos of my cat, things like that. So I sort of always played around with photography. I got a bit serious about it in my 20s. I went to art school and did a year of a fine art degree in photography, and really thoroughly enjoyed that. I learned a lot about processing black and white film and making prints in the darkroom. I was silly enough to learn how to do slide film, so I was developing a lot of my own slide film. I even photographed a friend's wedding. God, what was I thinking? Developed the film myself, but I sort of gave it all away. And when I had my daughter, I just didn't think chemicals go with being pregnant, so that went sort of to the side. And I didn't take too many photos for a long time, and I ended up going to uni as a mature age student again, but this time doing science. And I spent 10 years doing science. I did a PhD in Southern Ocean marine biology, which I really loved. It was most interesting. And I was lucky enough to do a trip on the 𝗃𝗃 down into the Southern Ocean. We did a lot of experiments on that trip for the effects of climate change, and particularly ocean warming. Anyway, that's sort of beside the point, really, because I didn't have a camera to take with me. I'd worn out my film camera, and I thought, oh, film's just too hard to use. So I thought, oh, I need a little digital camera. So I went out and bought a fairly expensive point and shoot camera, and I took that with me, and it took movies and things like that. So I had movies of waves and storms and albatross and whales and all that stuff, which was sort of good, but it frustrated me a lot because I had no control over the way I was shooting my images. And of course, having learned on a SLR way back, I really wanted to have those sort of tools at my fingertips. So when I came back, I ended up going and buying a Canon 5D Mark II, I think it was, and spent a few dollars. And I just loved it. And that's where it took off. And I got to the point where I was trying to write my PhD thesis, but I was sort of doing photography instead, which was a bit naughty. But anyway, I got through. And of course, this is the world that opened up to me. I started off doing sort of traditional landscapes, but I find it really hard to get out of bed at those ridiculous hours of the morning. It's just too cold. I can't handle it. So I just stopped doing landscape photography, really. So I had to find something else that was going to appeal. And I'd been looking at a couple of sites online. One was Redbubble, who I know there's a few ex-Redbubblers watching at the moment. Hi there. And also 500px. And with 500px at the time, there were a lot of European people putting their work up, and a lot of them were doing this really fascinating composite stuff. And it just blew my mind. I thought, I don't know how they do this. I had never even opened up Photoshop at that point. I'm not even sure whether I had it. But anyway, I thought, oh, I've got to learn how to do this. I just love it. It's just got me fired up. So to cut a long story short, I taught myself how to do it. And here I am. And I think you probably missed out on seeing this. This was my first composite image. It was, I called it Baldra. It was a bit sort of kitsch, I suppose, but I like the image. It sort of makes me think of my school holidays when I was a kid and going to the beach, because I live near the beach, and it just made me think of that sort of nice, warm feeling. And this is one of my later ones that won a few awards last year at the Australian Institute of Professional Photography Awards. I was lucky enough to get a gold award for this one. And this was an image that took 5 years to come to fruition. It was inspired by Joni Mitchell's song Big Yellow Taxi, for those of you who are old enough to remember her version of it. And it was again, I suppose my climate change science work comes through in a completely different way, but it sort of comes through in my work because it's a comment on the effect of climate change and how, although that wasn't Joni's theme, hers was more about pesticides and things like that. To me, this was how it's going to look in 100 years' time or more, where all the pictures of the scenery are on the walls and our trees are in bottles, because that's all that we're going to have left. So the rest are a bit more whimsical, I suppose. This one's a bit of a sequel to one a bit later on called 𝗟𝗓𝗏 𝗏𝗃. This was my friend 𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗆𝗏's cat, Edwin. He's such a character. He's a beautiful cat. And I just had to make an image around him. Money tree. Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? I'd love a money tree. This one was inspired by Greta Thunberg's speech to the EU, Our House is on Fire. And I was playing around with little planets because they're just good fun. And this one is about this. I called it Silent Spring, which is Rachel Carson's book about the impact of pesticides on the earth. And she wrote that back in the 60s. And it's inspired people like David Suzuki, David Suzuki's daughter, Svern, who's a big environmental campaigner, and Greta Thunberg too. So they're sort of fairly personal images that to do with climate change and my scientific background, although they're sort of not scientific. This was a fun one I did for my Christmas card. This is New York. I'm sure it's not looking like this right now, but this is the fun time when you can just sort of throw something together and get really silly and pretty and blingy. I enjoy these. And I put things in there that mean things to people that I'm going to send the card to. So I'll try and do that. This is my most recent one, and you'll probably see that up on the wall there behind me. And now we get to the image that I'm going to deconstruct, the making of spilt milk. This image comprises 177 layers. It's not the biggest one I've done, but it is quite substantial. And it's 9.3 gigabyte in size. That's the layered file, which again isn't that big because I had to reduce the size of a lot of the elements that went into it. There's over 40 individual photographs, and it mainly consists of the things that Adam teaches, of curves, levels, and some tonal adjustments. I don't do a lot of Photoshop trickery as such. I don't use, all the artistic filters and stuff like that. I want to keep it looking like I know they're fantasy, I know they're made up, but I want it to sort of have that instant thing, oh, it could be a photograph. Everything is photographically based. I don't use anything else. It's just photographs. So this is a picture of, excuse me, I need a sip of water. This is a picture of all the images that go into making up this image. And when I look at them, I think, oh my God, I'm crazy. There's just so many of them. But what I'm going to do is step you through how all of these were used in the image. So this is the finished image. And to start with, I used a landscape, which I will call out now is 𝗟𝗂𝗃, and I'm sure it doesn't look like that now, sadly. But I absolutely adored that place when I visited. It was just so beautiful. So that is the basic landscape. And then there's the sky. I dropped in a sky, different sky. I wanted it have a bit more texture than the original 𝗟𝗂𝗃 sky was. That's the tree, that's in my backyard. That's before we had our grass done. So I've cut that out, flipped it, and used it for the image. And quite often I walk out on the point at the place where I live, and there's a lot of gum trees and things out there. So I photographed all these branches for various different purposes, and so the branches are added to the tree. And the birdie. So stage one of it is the landscape and the tree sort of coming together. So that's sort of the first bit. And as you can appreciate, that's quite different to the finished image. So there's a fair bit to go on it. So the next thing was the house, and that is actually the toilet block at Cape Nelson Lighthouse in Victoria. Absolutely beautiful, beautiful lighthouse. I loved that. It was gorgeous. So I had to remove all the windows and patch them up with new boards. I flipped it and stretched it and squished it to make all three levels of the house. And so it became that, and then cut out where the windows were going to be. So I clearly wanted to put interiors in there for things to look at. So. And the windows were from the tennis court house at Government House in Hobart here. On an open day, I was able to photograph those. I loved that window. It was really lovely. And the door was from a church. Most of the photos actually are from Tasmania. So apart from that 𝗟𝗂𝗃 scene, all the others are from Tasmania, pretty much. So the spilt milk part of it. There's a bit of a story with this, with the steps. And I don't know whether you can see on the live stream there, that bottom step has what looks like some sort of liquid that's been dropped on there at some point and flipped over the edge. And it's still there, it's solid, it's hard. Wow, that just gave me the idea. I thought, oh, I'll just make that into milk. Because I'd already had the cat on the steps and things like that, and it all just sort of came together, I suppose. So, but I had to work out a way how I was going to photograph the milk in milk bottles that you can't buy anymore, and have it look like it was actually happening, like there. So I set up in my studio a bit of a practice session of, I used an old orange juice bottle that was pretty much the right shape, and I had to work out how full to have it to get the right flow. You didn't want it all blurping out all at once. You wanted that nice sort of slow flow so that it built up over the steps and moved down. So that took probably, I don't know, probably 50 or 60 photos to get it right. I also had to make milk bottles to stand there that showed the cream, although you probably can't see that in the picture. When you see the print, you can actually see the cream level at the top of the milk. So, and I had to make the silver bottle tops that we used to have years ago. And Pussycat, which was my daughter's cat, the side of the steps needed filling in because the original had the railing, which you can see here. I'm pointing up there, so I had to replace that railing with a brick fence. Sorry, stone fence. So then came the interiors, and they were just interiors of houses from my family, or from the weird looking creepy angel in the window came from Battery Point. Some of you might be familiar with that. The little round light was, I poked my phone over the fence and photographed my next door neighbour's front door because they had fly screen, you know, a security door over the main door. The spiral staircase was taken at a friend of a friend's house. So this is where they all go. Yep. So now I've got to stage 2, which is the landscape, the tree, the house, the windows, the interiors, the steps, everything's there. It's quite different colour when you look at the finished image. So the next bit was all the house decorations, and so you can see from there that little tree symbol, which I rather liked, and I thought was sort of fitting for a tree house. The story behind the tree house is I always wanted a tree house when I was a kid. I desperately wanted a tree house. And my father was more than capable of making one, but we just didn't have the tree, which was really sad. So I thought, well, I'll make my own. So this is it. So there's a few things here for decorations, and you can see, I've sort of left these photos so that you can sort of see how I've done it. Very, what's the word? Impromptu, I suppose. Just make it work. That's, it was the silliest thing I ever did, was to hang that up on a wall of the same colour. It was just the hardest thing to cut out. But you do these things and you live and learn. And my very good friend, 𝗃𝗍𝗂𝗍𝗆, who works at the Cascade Brewery, very kindly organised access to this Tasmanian tiger. He lives in the bar at the Cascade Brewery, and it's a real one, and he used to be mechanical. Unfortunately, they took all the mechanical stuff out of him, and he's just sitting there now. So, but he appears in quite a lot of my images, so he has a second life, which is sort of nice. He's pretty sort of ratty and moth-eaten and stuff, so he took a bit of work to bring him back to bit of beauty retouching was required on him. So the awnings, and with those I just changed the shape of them, or flipped them, stretched them, squished them, whatever was required to make them fit the windows and the perspective the best I could. Then all the lamps. Because this is sort of an imaginary place, I didn't sort of see the need to have them all the same. I thought, oh, it's sort of quite nice to have them all different. They all go in different places. And we need a satellite dish, like, you know, of course you have to have that sort of thing. This is a bit of a special tribute to my mother. My mother was a mad shell collector when we were kids, and we used to have to walk along beaches with her when we were tiny tots. Drove me nuts. But she made this beautiful picture out of the shells, that some of the shells that she collected, and we've still got it in the family. My daughter's actually wanting to have that. She loves it. What else is there? TV aerial. Yeah, of course you've got to have TV. So that's Tasman Island Lighthouse. I was lucky enough to fly over there in a helicopter for a trip, only for a couple of hours, but it was an awesome trip, really good. I went to school with a girl who could very well be watching today. She lived there, and it fascinated me, absolutely fascinated me. Living in a lighthouse, how cool would that be? So there we've got to the background, stage 3, where we've got all the house adornments, the lamps are there, the lighthouse is there, but it needs to be lit and sent into the night. So the colour stages and lighting come next, and so I produce a darker exposure and a colour temperature to the dark blue to simulate night. I wanted to have that pinky purple sunset, so I did one like that. And then the bright yellow, extreme yellow colour temperature to simulate artificial incandescent lighting. So there, it's a case of layering those 3 and masking out and masking in the various bits of light and colour that you want to finish the image. So the next stage really is just getting the levels correct, which is an absolutely sort of critical part of the image making and the final step, plus putting the moon in. and the stars, which I use a photograph of white sky, almost an overexposed white sky, and I use that also to make the bulbs in the lights and lamps. So the final elements, they were the final elements, and so that's the final image after setting the levels, the white and the black points, so that it looks nice and bright. You've got great contrast in it, and it's all ready to go. 177 odd layers and 40 odd photographs and 9.3 gigabyte of my hard drive later. So what I've got now is, if I can make it work, I hope I can, a little film that shows it all from the beginning, all the layers sort of coming together. So hopefully this will work. The background and the sky, tree, the reflection of the bird in the window. I need some music in this, don't I? I really do use very similar workflow processes that Adam's been teaching and showing us in these daily live streams. And I keep it as simple as that, because if you get too tricky, it can trip you up big time. I think, is that it? Oh, there's a bit more. Yeah, that's it. So some of my other images, I thought I'd just go through a few of the other ones that I've done and show you the number of layers, the number of photographs that go into it, and the size of the files, just so you can appreciate that these aren't just simple images. They're very complex. They take a long time. I've never actually recorded the number of hours because I pick them up and put them down so often. I don't really know, but they do take a while. Occasionally one comes together really quickly, but it's not often. This one I did before I bought my current computer, and it really struggled. My old computer really struggled to deal with this, and I had to construct it in a completely different way of several files, as it was just killing it. Frustrating. This was the Owl and the Pussycat one. That's Dear Little Edwin as a kitten. That was the one before Open by Appointment, where he's all grown up and selling curiosities in France. Manhattan. My daughter and I did a trip to the States back in mid-2018, and we had a great time. Loved New York, and I feel really sad for it at the moment. Tree Museum, that's 138 layers, 43 photographs, which is hard to imagine, but like all those images in the background are photographed separately in various museums around in America and in Australia. A lot of the bottles consist of a number of photographs. There's old Edwin and his boutique curiosity. Our House is on Fire, 101 layers, 41 photographs. It's hard to see where all the photographs are, I suppose, and you know, that's my aim, is to try and get it to blend in so it looks like one photograph. This is one of my latest ones. And this is one I did for a local charity here that takes in newborn kittens that have been dumped and cares for them, raises them as beautiful little kitties and adopts them out. So this is to raise funds. All my proceeds from the sale of this image go to the Neonatal Kitten Rescue Hobart to continue their work. They have rather expensive veterinary needs, and they need to buy incubators, humidity cribs, that type of thing. So it is quite an expensive exercise. But oh my gosh, these kittens are so gorgeous and so friendly. They're beautiful. So that's pretty much it. That's where you can subscribe. That's my website. If you want to go and have a look, there's a whole heap more imagery there to look at and browse through. As Adam said, they're all available for purchase as limited edition prints through the gallery. If you come straight to me, that's fine, but it will go through the gallery. Yeah, they're fairly big prints. Most of the landscape ones, like that one that you can see there, is about 20 by 30 inches. Images like Tree Museum are 540mm square. So they're quite large. And you can see that one there is how big they look on the wall. So they're quite substantial. And one thing I was going to mention was this one. This is one I'm working on at the moment about, there's this bit of a series of where I'm setting myself a task to use the same main elements and tell a story over a number of days and maybe a year. I don't know I've got no idea where it'll end up. But I wondered if anyone was interested in learning how I did this one. It's still not finished yet, but it is still fairly simple, and I'd be happy to sort of work through that one on Photoshop and show people how I did it, if you're interested. So that's it. I don't know whether Adam's got any questions, but I'll stop sharing now and we go back to our...
Let me get this set up. Here we go. I think I'm coming back into the feed now. Thank you. That was absolutely amazing. And I think everyone will agree. Wow, so inspirational, so much work. What really stood out to me was the attention to detail. Like something as subtle as the reflection of the bird in the window. Just phenomenal. And all that detail inside the house. When I looked at the image, first of all, I thought maybe that detail was in the house. But no, it's all been placed in there, and oh my God, so amazing. We had, just to let you know, we set a new channel record with about 200. Woohoo! I'm going to be chasing that one down for months before we reach that again. But everyone was loving it. We got a lot of attention. 200, that's concurrently, so there would have been a lot more people dropping in and out as we went on. I do have some questions. Shall we jump into that? And I'll just say for everyone watching along, fire over some more questions. And once I get through these, I'll double check if there's any more. Before we do that, just so I don't forget, make sure you jump over and check out Sue Ellen's work at her website. The link is down below. The gallery link is there as well. I noticed Tom Putt said he would love to see one in 60-inch. There you go. It'd be amazing as a giant print. Absolutely.
Well, there is one. Actually, Spilt Milk is actually on the wall at my my printer, a full gamut in Harrington Street in Hobart. They printed it on like a wallpaper thingy and put it up on the wall. It's massive. Like, wow. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So
there you go, Tom Putt. You can have your entire lounge room wall.
Yeah, so it does look pretty sort of, well, I don't know what you call the word. It's overwhelming, in fact, to see it sort of up so big, but yeah, it does look cool.
It would look incredible. That's an incredible image. I just absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. Let's jump into some questions. I had a couple of my own. I'll come back to those. Rosie asked, and I think it was answered in the stream anyway, but I wanted to ask this for yourself as well. She said, are all the photos captured by yourself? All those different pieces? Yeah.
Absolutely. That was one of the rules I made for myself when I first started, is I never wanted to resort to using stock photography at all, or anybody else's photos. I always wanted to use my own, so that I felt it was authentically my work and not somebody else's work.
And I think that's one of the hardest things about illustrative photography for mine, because I often will have an interesting idea, but then when I start thinking about all the images that I need to capture to try and put that together, for me, it becomes too much hard work. So must be a lot of dedication and time and effort in going and grabbing all those individual pieces as well.
I mean, that's part of the fun of it is like when you have this idea and I use a journal, I write it out. Sometimes I'll draw it. I'm a terrible drawer, but nobody else looks at it. It's just for me. But then I write a shopping list of shots that I need. So, we write shopping lists for the supermarket. So we write a shopping list for all the bits and pieces that I want to use. And after a while, I suppose you build up a bit of a library of things too, and things that you like to use again and again. I've got my favourite lamps. I've got, that sort of thing, and they'll reappear in lots of images.
Yes.
That sort of thing. But I mean, I'm always out looking for stuff.
Yeah.
Always out.
Yeah. Anytime you see.
Shopping lists are great.
Well, there you go. There's a hint. There's a tip. Tom Putt asks, and I'm not sure, you did kind of brush over this. Do you know roughly how many hours you spent on, say, Spilt Milk, like as a rough gauge?
Yeah, no, I don't. I have no idea, but I think it took me, because I made that one when I was working as well outside of art, and I probably spent 2 months doing it. So that's probably, a lot of weekend work, evenings, that type of thing. And they develop to a certain point, and then I've got to put them down for a while because I've got to come back at it with fresh eyes, or get someone else to look at it and say, no, that's wrong, or you've got the shadows wrong, or, things like that. So I never really count the hours that I put into them because it's never continuous.
No.
I would imagine that if I looked at, say, Spilt Milk, I mean, you got to take into account all the photographing the bits and pieces too. So that's quite time consuming. And sometimes it can be quite a while to collect all the things that you want. So that can take a long time.
Yeah.
But just the Photoshop work is probably, I don't know, I reckon it'd be a full-time week or two.
40 or 80 hours maybe?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Oh, it's just beautiful.
That's why I don't spend $20.
Oh, Karen asks, did you have a vision or an idea of the finished product before you started? I guess you probably had some idea,
yeah? Some idea, but some images I do draw it out of the way I want it. Say with the Tree Museum image, it took a long time to develop it to that point, the concept, and that was just on paper. But then once I sort of hooked onto that idea of the bottles on a shelf in a museum, I drew it out, and that came together sort of quite quickly. And although they never end up exactly the same, because I'm not that clever to make it exactly the same, well, there's a lot of stuff I don't know how to do. So I have to work within what I've got in imagery and my skill level. And so I will often, it'll often sort of take its own course, I suppose. And an image will actually talk to you. That sounds like I'm mad, but they do talk to you and tell you how they want to go. And they will only go that way. It's weird. It is quite strange, but that's what happens. So, yeah, sometimes they don't turn out at all. Spilt Milk probably had that idea, but it was a bit loose, how it would turn out. But I think it turned out better than what I imagined in the beginning. And Tree Museum was pretty much the way I thought. Just trying to think of one that wasn't. I can't think off the top of my head. There's quite a few on my website that came out completely different to how I first thought. So, but that's fine. I quite enjoy that. I like that sort of spontaneity. I like that excitement that, it's not so mechanical. It's not so sort of studio produced feel about it. It's more spontaneous and organic, I suppose.
Almost
the word.
Almost guided by the image itself, isn't it? Like you get to a certain point and it changes a direction, and all of a sudden you think, well, hang on, that's not what I had in mind, but I'm going to follow that path anyway and see where it goes to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. And you sort of, I audition different elements for for the images, and some will work and others won't. You know, they'll look, yeah, that's really good. I really like that. I'll go with that one.
Yeah.
Whereas perhaps the original one, like the tree in the tree museum, the very last tree, the dead tree. Originally, I had it as a broken tree on the ground, and I had it in my head. I could see it, but I couldn't make it happen. It just didn't work. So I had to toss that idea and go with another.
Yeah.
But I quite, because it ended up being better, you know, actually better than what I'd imagined in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a beautiful image. It's my favourite. That one speaks to me.
Yeah.
Robin asks, cutting out images. Any tips? She specifically asked, is black or white backgrounds better to cut out an image? But do you have any special techniques? Like, I'm assuming, make sure you choose a colour that is different to the subject you're trying to cut out. Like the bird cage was a creamish colour and the background was a creamish colour, which made it super difficult, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, with that one, I just had no choice. I had to use the pen tool. And that was probably where I learnt to use the pen tool better than what I had previously. But that was the only choice. Otherwise, I'd have to rephotograph it. And I think that one, because that went in awards in 2017, I think it was, and I was running out of time to get it done. So I thought I had to just run with it. Now I've still got the birdcage. I'd go and photograph it against, I'd probably, well, as far as what coloured background, a lot of my images that I use are just taken where they are. You know, it might be a lamp on someone's house. So I just have to accept the background. And I've learnt to accept backgrounds because I can't sort of unscrew the lamp and take it somewhere else. I try and find, like you, Adam, I love cloudy days for dull days because that sort of means that you've got more leverage in terms of what you want to do with it in the light, changing the light. You're not sort of stuck by the direction of light that happened on the day. I try and use 4 things that I photograph in the studio. I'll try and use a background that's a similar colour to what it's going to be on in the picture, because that reduces the impact of halos. And halos are the hardest things to get rid of, although I like your way of doing it. And I'm going to try that one. It's sort of slightly different to the way I do it, but, you know, same sort of principle. But yeah, I try and photograph things on the same sort of coloured background. So if I'm going to photograph something, or if I'm going to put something on a pale background, I'll photograph it on white or grey. I use grey. I just bought a piece of grey fabric and use that. But by far the majority of my images are photographed in situ, so I have no say in it.
Yeah.
I just should get out on grey days.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Sandra asks, do you have a favourite colour matching technique? Are you tweaking the hues, or how are you colour matching? Do you have a favourite, or just whatever works?
I probably tend towards the cool colours, whether they're like cool yellow or cool blue. I like those sort of cool colours. They just resonate with me, but they don't always resonate with other people. Most people like warm colours.
Sure.
So, and it's interesting when you look at the what people are attracted to. They do definitely get attracted to the warm colours, and spilt milk is definitely in the warm spectrum. I think even the blues are warm blues; they're not cold blues.
Yeah.
I don't really have a favourite, and I don't have any technique for doing it. I use similar to you, Adam. I just play around with curves until I think it looks right, and I like it.
Perfect.
You know, very just sort of seat of the pants.
Yeah. Well, it works. It works. Trust me. Go with it. Keep going with it. I've got one more question written down here, and then I'll double check over there that we haven't got any more. Andrew says, how long have you been working in this beautiful creative style? So when did you first start creating in this style? Has it always been a passion, and what got you started?
I started doing it at the very beginning of, or the very end of 2011. I think it was December 2011. I did The first image that I ever did, which was sort of a copy of someone else's, because I figured that was the only way I was going to work out how to do it, which it'll never see the light of day because it was somebody else's. It's completely different to the original. So totally awful. But yeah, so I started then, and I think I produced Boardroom, which was my first one, in the January of 2012.
Okay.
And I've been doing it ever since, and I love it. I've had downtimes for sure, where I've had very little inspiration, but I try and do things, mix it up a bit, and do things to try and motivate myself. When I'm feeling like I have no ideas, I've produced the best image I'm ever going to produce. Can't think of another one. I have all those feelings all the time, and people say to me, when I say that to people that know me well, they say, "Oh God, I've heard all that before. You'll come up with something else."
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, we've all been
so
there.
I haven't always.
We've all been
I think
there.
I said earlier that originally I was a landscape photographer, but I got to the point where early mornings were just, I hate getting out of bed, so it just wasn't going to work. So I just found, and as I was saying before, I saw these composite images that were really dark and spooky and fascinating, being produced by Eastern European countries, people there, and I was just like, oh, I need to know how to do this. I just loved it, and I was inspired by people like 𝗂𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗯, who does quite interesting surreal work in the darkroom.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? Like, it's crazy good. So yeah, there's quite a few people sort of around the world that have inspired me. But as I said before, I'm not into Photoshop sort of trickery and that totally surreal sort of look. I'm just more into producing little worlds that you can get lost in.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Give me 1 second. I'll just see if we've got any more questions over here. Looks like we've just got one more.
Yep.
Emma asks, do you have any specific resources? Hang on, what did she ask? Specific resources you recommend for building your skill set, knowledge, inspiration?
Skill set, 𝗟𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗍 photography.
Oh, thank you.
And the reason I say that, in all seriousness, is that Photoshop is a difficult thing to master. And I know when I started, as I said, nobody taught me how to use Photoshop. I taught myself, and it was extremely slow, painful, and frustrating time. And I think Adam does actually make it relatively easy to follow and be able to produce something that satisfies the itch. The reason that you've got into this in the first place. So you can actually see, oh wow, I took that, I did that, wow, and that
It does.
and that's the inspiration. As for inspiration for imagery, you'd probably have to look inside my brain. I have no idea where they come from, but I do like songs, music, lyrics, things like that. I like the older songs, I suppose, when I was sort of like a teenager and stuff. Some of those, I suppose I grew up at the time with the Vietnam War protests and things like that. There were a lot of really powerful songs being written and sung at that time, and I loved it. And they inspire me a bit. So I try and find that. I look at poetry occasionally, and book titles often inspire me, but things inspire me. I mean, if you look through my website, you'll see that lighthouses are a common theme. I just find them really fascinating, and that's just me. I don't think a lot of people are fascinated by stuff like that. So yeah, it's just finding just getting in touch with how you feel really, and seeing what you can do with it. It's just a storytelling exercise, really.
Absolutely.
I don't know what else I can say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
I've forgotten whether I answered the question now.
No, I think you did. We were talking, inspiration. I think you did. Inspiration and skill set. Yeah, I think that was pretty well covered. I think we're pretty well done there. So a huge thank you from myself and also on behalf of the entire audience today for not only giving us your time and knowledge and presenting that incredible presentation, but also being the guinea pig and helping me set this up over the last few days with many more hours of your time. It's been absolutely incredible. So thank you
great.
so
loved it.
much.
Yeah. Yes, collaborations are great. They're very inspiring. Thank you.
Absolutely. And what I will say before everyone jumps off is go over and click on Sue Ellen's website. You'll find the website link in the description below. Have a look at the gallery links as well. Her images are absolutely spectacular. For me, they bring back a sense of that childhood joy and spontaneity and storytelling and all that stuff. They would look absolutely incredible on anyone's wall. Jump down there and have a look. Spilt Milk, of course, is nearly sold out. What edition are we up to? 40?
44.
44
and it's only a
50. Okay.
So there's only a half a dozen left.
Only half a dozen left. So if you love that image and you want to collect it and maybe an investment, it could be worth many, many multiples of that in the future, then jump over there and have a look at that. But once again, thank you so much. Thanks for thanks for giving us all your time. Was there anything else you wanted to add as we sign off here?
No, just I'm glad. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. And if you want to see me again, then just hassle Adam.
Yeah, we will absolutely take you up on that. As we keep building this up, we'll bring you back for another look at another image or another presentation.
Yeah, no, it'll be good.
Thank you once again. Thank you everyone out there who's watched along. Be sure to hit be sure to hit the subscribe button, notifications. We do it every day at 10 a.m. Monday to Friday. Thank you once again, and I'll see you tomorrow morning with some photo critique. Thanks so much, Sue Ellen.
Pleasure.
I'll end this stream here. You can stay